The views expressed, opinions given, and any communication made between the hosts and guests of What Are You Afraid of Horror and Paranormal Show do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of Para-X Radio, EMC Network, or all services that play this show. The hosts and services are not responsible for the actions of their guests, and the original rights of all intellectual property is retained by the creator, and all work is used with either permission or Creative Commons license. The show is for entertainment purposes only. I'm horror author T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm horror author and filmmaker Phil Thomas.
And tonight we're asking you,
what are you afraid of? Philadelphia's horror home with hosts T. Fox Dunham and Phil Thomas.
Alright, and we are back. And this is What Are You Afraid Of? Episode 74, The Ghost DJ.
The Ghost DJ.
Yes.
Yes.
How are you, Fox?
I'm hanging in.
Hanging in?
You know, I've not been feeling so well the last couple of weeks, but I mean, the audience might hear that I'm talking a little funny.
A little, yeah. I mean, your voice is a little raspier than normal.
Yeah, I'm a little bit I'm compensating for some post-radiation issues,
right.
But you survive.
Right. You survive. You get through it somehow.
And the show goes on.
That's right. Is that that's the old show business term, right?
The show must go on. Yes,
yep.
Indeed, and we continue to maintain our Para-X Radio obligations, 3 shows a month.
That's right.
And you can also find the show on EMC Network, and you can find it on like all the major podcast services: iTunes, iHeartRadio, Spotify, Stitcher, just all of them. Google Play. We are everywhere.
Yeah. You turn, you look, there we are.
There we are. Yeah, we're haunting you.
Yeah.
We're Philadelphia's home for horror. I'm T. Fox Dunham.
And I'm Phil Thomas.
Episode 74, The Ghost DJ, because we are back with part 2 with an interview with a wonderful author and a fine conversationalist. A conversationalist with not only the living, but also the dead.
Right, yeah.
She wrote a book called My Life Amidst the Paranormal. Let me say that again. She wrote a book called My Life Amidst the Paranormal. Cathy Gasch. You can find that on Amazon.com with links for that up on the site at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com. It's a book of ghost stories about experiences that this sensitive has had. And the wonderful thing about it that I said in the last episode is that it's also like a travel book, because she talks about some of the many wonderful places she's gone to visit and encountered spirits there. And she gives details about the inn and the setting and the different, taverns she's been to and the people that she's met. And it gives you an insight into this world of the paranormal. It
really is a great, paranormal travel guide.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, that's what she should write next. The Paranormal Travel Guide to Ireland.
Right. There you go.
By Cathy Gasch, T. Fox Dunham, and Phil Thomas, because we're all going.
That's right, we're all going to go.
We're going to go to Ireland, yeah. And Cathy's back with us tonight. How are you, Cathy?
Hello.
I'm fine, thank you, and thank you for having me back.
Absolutely. It's been a great experience so far with you, and we've really enjoyed speaking to you, and I'm sure our listeners will love hearing your many ghost stories. We were speaking last episode about James, which was your key experience. It was the keystone event in your life. It really, it was like the threshold point that opened up the world to you of the paranormal. And we'd played a ghost story that you'd written from the book called James, read by David Walton,
right.
Our wonderful David Walton. And you said you had something interesting to add to that story. Do you want to tell us about that?
Yes, indeed. After I had written the story James, on my computer, how it all came about to begin with, or why my book came out, was that my publisher, Mike Ricksecker with Haunted Road Media, he and I had investigated together a number of times over the years. And he let me know that he was in the process of writing an anthology of stories and asked if I would be willing to submit a couple of stories, of my experiences to add to this book. So I did. James was one of them. And he had a friend of his who is a wonderful illustrator. He does pen and ink, he does charcoal, and he asked if I would be willing to have this person, whose name is Adam Tillery, to do a rendering of a couple of my stories, the 2 stories that I submitted. Well, I said, yes, of course, go ahead and do that. Well, before the book came out, Mike emailed me a forwarded, finished rendering of what Adam thought James looked like, based not only on what I said in my book, but Adam is also very much a sensitive. He's what I would refer to as an intuitive illustrator. He not only does the illustrations from what you tell him, but what he picks up on mentally. And when Mike sent me the email with the illustration of James, which is included in the book, I broke down in tears. Mm-hmm. Because it looked so much like him. It was like I was right back there again, looking at this little boy. And I contacted Mike and I contacted Adam, and I said, Adam nailed it. Mm-hmm. It was just phenomenal. I couldn't believe it. So it was quite a capper, not only because I was allowed to tell my story and put it in print, but also because Adam illustrated James so wonderfully, so beautifully, that it really touched me. And I'm very proud to say that Adam took all of the illustrations that are depicted in my book, along with a number of his other ones, and he put it in a gallery exposition in his hometown, and it went over so well. And he sent me pictures of all of my illustrations up on the wall, and I was, oh, wow. That made me feel so wonderful.
Oh, I bet.
Pictures with each ghost story that he did remind me a lot of Stephen Gamble's work from Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark.
Yeah.
Those wonderful black and white monochromatic spooky drawings. And it was so cool to read a ghost story book that not only had photos, but also had artist renditions.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I couldn't have been more pleased the way it turned out. Could not have been more pleased.
What was it like for you to write these stories? I know you'd experienced them, and I'm sure you told them many times. But did you have to work at your prose? Did you have to do a short story structure? What is your process like when you put these stories down on paper?
Well, to be honest with you, all I did was sit down at the keyboard and just started typing. Mm-hmm. I started from
remembering your experiences, right? Just sitting there,
yes,
recalling everything and just letting it flow
and
out.
Then I fine-tuned it to include not only the location, but a few more details about the location, and then finished it up with a little extra. But for the most part, all of my stories are just based on my memories. Right. That's all they are.
Mm-hmm. That's great.
Incredible. So, and then you're working on another book, correct?
Yes.
What's that one about?
I'm hoping that, it will be in addition to these stories, because goodness knows I've had more than my share of experiences over the years. So this book was just only a handful. Mike asked me if I could write about 15 stories, and that's what I did. Mm-hmm. The next book that's coming out will be based on the experiences that I've had that have touched me in some way, whether it be emotionally, spiritually, or even physically. And so it will be aptly named with the word touched in the title. And I'm hoping that it'll come out around April or May, around my birthday.
Nice.
Well, make sure to promote that book and to put links up to it at our website at www.whatayouafraidofpodcast.com. And Haunted Road Media looks pretty cool. Looks like you've got You've got Lee Ehrlich, you've got Paul Johnstone, of course, Vanessa Hoggle, Amelia Cutter, and Adam Tillery, and it looks like a great publisher for our audience to check out at www.haunted road media, where you can find a lot of their books, their authors, their podcasts that they're doing. And I love this picture of you, Cathy, sitting at the table with the 3 little ghosts in the front.
Yes, that was at a conference.
This looks like something from Gettysburg, you know?
It does.
Actually, it was,
totally
yes.
That was
Gettysburg.
That was Gettysburg?
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that last year? Because I was going to go, but I fell ill. In fact, I thought it was Gettysburg.
Looks like it.
We were just out in Gettysburg in September with Mark Nesbitt, and he does ghost tours of Gettysburg. He's written all those great ghost books, and we sat down with him in his parlor for a couple of hours and did a couple of great shows.
Yeah, that was great
with Mark.
Yeah,
that was a wonderful experience. And I did. What did you see in Gettysburg? Did you have any paranormal encounters while you were there?
When do I not?
Yeah, let's hear about some of those. Yeah,
it's everywhere there.
Yeah.
Yes, there's not many places in Gettysburg that a person with any kind of sensitive abilities can go that they're not going to pick up on something. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that Gettysburg, the town itself, is part of the battlefield. Mm-hmm. It wasn't just out in the fields that they fought. It was done door to door, street to street. So you had death and carnage and everything all throughout the entire town. And many of the homes were used as field hospitals. So you also had death and so forth in the homes. And so it wasn't just limited to the farms and the barns and such. It was up and down the roads. Mm-hmm. So many of the places that are open to the public for tours or open for businesses, there's something there. There's just no doubt about it.
It really was everywhere. I mean, even if you look at the side of the Farnsworth house with all the bullet holes in the side of the brick,
yes,
and that's not on a battlefield. That's right off the street, And Jenny Wade house where the bullet went through the door, that's not a battlefield either. I mean, it was. Like you just said, it was in the town as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any?
Gettysburg has a lot of very, very deep energy, but my favorite place as far as battlefields is Antietam. Antietam has an entirely different feel than Gettysburg, and that is my favorite battlefield to go to.
Why is that?
In order to pick up spirits.
Is there a particular reason for that?
I think mostly because there is so much live human energy in Gettysburg, because Gettysburg is quite a tourist town.
Yes, it is.
And there's a number of live people there almost continuously, especially in the summer. You've got busloads of people. And at Antietam, it's a little more quiet. There's less people. Mm-hmm. And so fewer groups have gone down there, or fewer paranormal people have gone down there to try and communicate. And so I think, in all honesty, the spirits at Antietam are a lot more willing and open to communicate with you because not many people do.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
It's like a breath of fresh air to them or something.
Incredible. Yeah, my wife and I, we plan to get to Antietam this summer. We'd like to
definitely look me up then,
yeah.
because I'm just not even a half hour away from there.
Oh, you're pretty close. Oh, excellent.
Yes.
Well, then we shall do that, because we'd love to have a little private ghost tour of Antietam with our psychic guide.
More than happy to. More than happy to.
Wonderful. So, one of the things we ask our guests, and this is not something you really talked about in the book, and there was one particular story that really got to me, and that was the one where you had arrived in Edinburgh with your friend, and you got to the house, and the lady offered you tea, but you were hungry, so you wanted to go down to the local pub. And she didn't want you to because she didn't want you to meet the locals, obviously, which would probably hurt her business. But you and your friend decided to go anyway, and you had some wonderful ghost story encounters there. But the other one, too, speaking of bars, is when you were in D.C., and you went down, and they discovered a tunnel built into the wall that had been condemned by the inspectors, so the owner couldn't let you in. and you would suppose that the tunnel was being used to hide stolen goods, and you had this encounter with something dark and rather frightening. Can you tell us a little about that?
Yes, there's a number of places along the canal area in Washington, D.C. that not only had basements and storage areas for canning goods and storage and things like that, but right after the canal was very, very popular for the transport of supplies, there were many people that pirated those barges in order to steal things. And so people along that entire stretch, if they had basements, they would take things off of those barges and store them in the basements. They also used that area as part of the Underground Railroad during the Civil War. So there were places that slaves were housed for a number of years or months or years down there. Mm-hmm. But this particular location, this spirit came out of that tunnel, and it was a very eerie feeling. I didn't like it. It felt strange. And I had already encountered what I think was the same one in the bathroom upstairs, where I saw movement and saw shadow and saw a dark in the bathroom. And then I found out later on from the owner that people had experienced the same thing in that bathroom. Mm-hmm. But it was interesting that in that basement, when that spirit went past us, all of us felt almost like a cold breeze. Mm-hmm. It was like every one of us knew that something passed by us.
And your advice was seal up the tunnel.
Yes. A number of people had already said that, not because the spirit was evil or anything, but apparently he was using that location as a doorway from one location to another, because those tunnels went under many, many houses in those areas. But a lot of it had collapsed or they were closed off. So I didn't really feel that he belonged in that location to begin with. So my advice was seal that thing back up, because he doesn't belong in this building.
Well, we have another story from your book, your wonderful book, which I've very much enjoyed reading, called My Life Amidst the Paranormal, which can be found at Amazon.com, and we'll have links for that up at the website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com. And this particular story, one was set in Ireland, and it's called The Irish Millhouse, and it's read by our British folk singer, David Walton, on What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal Show.
The Irish Millhouse, written by Cathy Gasch, September 24th, 2014. From her book, My Life Amidst the Paranormal, published by Haunted Road Media, read by David Walton. I had always wanted to visit Ireland, since my maternal grandmother told me we had Irish connections. So, after my mother passed away in December of 1991, I convinced my sister to take a break and go with me to the Emerald Isle to help with our grief and do some bonding time. After much planning, we arranged for a 2-week vacation, and we left for Shannon Airport the first week in March of 1992. We rented a car and called ahead to stay the night in bed and breakfasts along our route. Having allowed myself to develop my abilities as a sensitive over the years, soon after we arrived I was able to sense many different spirits all around me, but I never said a word to my sister about what I felt. She and I had very different views of what happens to us after we pass, and despite both of us growing up in a home with some very unexplainable occurrences, she considered herself to be a skeptic. The odd part was that she claimed she didn't believe in ghosts, but was quick to say she never wanted to see one. Lol. My sister, taking her turn behind the wheel that day, was very tired and drove well past the town that we had made arrangements to stay the night in. Realising we were all but lost and it was getting late, we had to make a decision to find another place to stay for the night. We soon saw the familiar sign for a bed and breakfast just ahead, and we were relieved. The building was a whitewashed 2-storey stone structure sitting alongside a fast-moving stream, with the remains of a large wooden water wheel and metal mechanism leaning against the side. It looked almost abandoned, and the yard was covered with lumber, bags and equipment. My sister didn't like the look of the place and wanted to move on. Me, I was tired, hungry, and needed a restroom, so she relented and pulled into the driveway. Even though we had no reservation, I got out and knocked on the door. A lovely young woman answered the door, and I inquired if they had a vacancy. She was polite and said they did, as long as we didn't mind some dust from the renovations they were doing. We were most welcome. We were escorted inside and were met by a cosy, warm and inviting living room with a peat fire and a friendly little black dog excitedly wagging its tail. She showed us to our room, which was on the top floor that overlooked the stream and their animal farm. We unpacked, went downstairs and asked about where to go for dinner. Even though they usually only served breakfast in the morning, our host invited us to share dinner with she and her husband for a small fee. We gladly accepted. Over a tasty dinner, our host shared with us the story of the building. It was built in the early 1800s as a grist mill and used until the 1930s. It then stood vacant for more than 20 years before someone bought it as a residence. 6 months ago, our hosts bought it to use as a bed and breakfast, finding out quickly all that was needed to renovate and restore the building. But they were determined and had a couple of rooms open to help with the funds. After dinner, we were given a short tour of the grounds, met their farm animals and watched a beautiful sunset. Around 10 p.m, we went to our room. My sister took her shower, climbed into bed and was dozing off to sleep, but I wasn't yet sleepy, so I started to read. A few hours went by and I still wasn't sleepy, so I took out my cassette recorder, plugged in my earphones and played a music tape to help me relax. It was around 2:30 a.m. when I noticed how cold it was in the room and got up to check the radiator. It was barely warm. I noticed that my sister was curled up in a tight ball, obviously cold, so I placed an extra blanket over her, put one on my bed, climbed in and turned on my player. The first thing that came to mind was that it wasn't just cold in the room, it was what I thought of as bone cold. The kind of cold that crept into every part of your body and made you uncomfortable. As I lay there shivering, I looked towards the door that led out into the hallway and noticed that a white light was shimmering along the wall, going all the way to the large window that overlooked the stream. When my eyes adjusted to the dim light, I watched as 2 sets of steps, a scaffold and 2 landings appeared against the wall. Then, the figure of a young man appeared on the second landing. He was sitting with his legs dangling over the edge, with his arms folded on the bottom rail, resting his chin on his hands. Was I asleep and dreaming? Am I that tired and imagining it? I blinked my eyes over and over again. I rubbed my eyes, then looked up. The landing and the man were still there. Everything was muted in colour, like a washed-out photo, but the details were incredible. The scaffolding, landings and stairs were made of unevenly cut wood, but had enough support for a lot of weight. It went almost entirely to the ceiling and seemed to disappear against the wall with the large window. The man was dressed in trousers that came just below the knee, with turned-up cuffs, stockings and small slipper-like shoes. His shirt was simple, open at the neck, with cuffs rolled up to above the wrist. His hair was short and his face had a pleasant look of curiosity. As I laid there, shivering, I heard in my head, not my ears, a voice saying one word as a question. Music? I was a bit startled, but also chuckled to myself. Could he perhaps hear Beethoven through the loose earphones? Yes, it's music, I said aloud but softly. The man tilted his head, lifted his right hand towards his ear, and I heard, "What?" Oh, he was wanting to know what my earphones were. Again I chuckled to myself and said, "It's how I hear music." To which he nodded slightly and put his chin down again. How wonderful. He knew I was there. I thought I would get up and go and have a nice chat with him, but then, at that moment, the cassette in the player ended and it automatically shut off with a loud click. I looked down just long enough to hit the off button, and when I looked up again, the scaffolding and the man were completely gone. The room was back to being dark, and I could hear the tinkling sound of the radiator heating up. Darn it. I waited for a while in case he returned, but by 3 a.m. I put down the cassette player, turned on my side, and fell fast asleep. The next morning, my sister was already up and packing and complaining about how cold it was that night and griping at me for deciding to stay there at all. We enjoyed a hearty breakfast, and as my sister was taking our bags to the car, I stayed for a few moments to fill out the little courtesy card about our stay. As our host took the card, she asked if we had any suggestions to assist them with future guests. My sister chimed in that they should keep the heat on longer, then walked away again. I was very honest with her and stated that they should be prepared to hear that guests were not alone in that room. She looked at me and her jaw dropped. At first I thought she had taken offence, but instead she said in a hushed tone that she knew it may be haunted and was worried it would keep people away. After telling her about seeing the scaffolding, landings and steps appearing against the wall, she explained that that was indeed where the mechanism had come through the wall to turn the water wheel, and behind the dry wall were the impressions of it against the stone face. Then I told her with a laugh about the man who was so curious about my music and earphones. She looked embarrassed and apologised if we had been disturbed by what happened. I told her it didn't bother me a bit, and that my sister had slept through it all anyway. I explained to her that I was a sensitive, that I perhaps saw this because of it, and that many of their guests would probably never have any experiences at all. She explained that when she and her husband, a skeptic, first moved in and began renovations, items were taken and moved. They saw shadows, heard sounds of machinery, and their dog refuses to go upstairs. The neighbours had warned them it was haunted and it wouldn't do to open a business there. She teared up at the thought that they might just be right. I told her that to me, the man I saw was friendly, and the woman I also sensed was more than happy to have people in the place again. That all she had to do was explain to her residents that it was their home now, and to please respect the guests they have. I don't know if it was reassuring to her, but she sighed, smiled, thanked me, shook my hand and walked me to the car. After getting directions to our next destination from our host, being my turn to drive, I pulled out of the driveway and onto the road. I was rested and ready for another day of adventures. I looked back at the old mill, heard the dog barking, and couldn't help but smile, thinking these people were going to do well. When I was planning my third trip to Ireland in 2006, I looked up that bed and breakfast and was happy to see that it was still in business after 14 years and with the same owners. The photo in the book showed a beautifully restored building with carefully tended gardens and a small photo of the owners with a new little dog, and they had a 4-star rating. I smiled, knowing our hosts and their permanent guests were able to live together and be successful after all.
I'm Jenna Valadez with the Basement Files. Tune in Friday nights, 6 p.m. Central, 7 p.m. Eastern, right here on the Para-X Radio Network.
Caliburn Press, LLC is a Madison, Wisconsin-based publishing company owned and operated by Alan Ledden. Caliburn works with talented writers, artists, editors, and marketers throughout the United States, and you can find their books through their many imprints that include Damnation Books, Eternal Press, Malaferia Press, Ciento Sordida Publishing, and Spiro Publishing. Please visit their website at sites.google.com/site/Caliburn Press LLC/home, or Google Caliburn Press to check out their growing list of titles on Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, and any other place fine books are sold.
Crawl in, the worms crawl out, they crawl all over your dirty snout, your chest.
My name is David Walton. I am a vocal performer for What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal show, and I have carried the burden of a terrible secret. I am actually what is offensively called a ghost. For years now I have concealed my ectoplasmic existence from my friends and family in fear of a common prejudice against ghosts, or what we like to call the disembodied. I have existed frightened of being discovered, unable to do physical acts that the embodied take for granted, such as walking a squirrel or drinking a glass of vitamin E milk fresh squeezed from a whale. I grew depressed and even considered acts of self-harm or reincarnation, which is suicide for the disembodied. Such movies as Ghostbusters and its sequels drove my feelings of disenfranchisement, and I began looking for help, only to encounter painful exorcisms in the houses I haunted. Then I met two good people, it says here, Fox and Phil, at What Are You Afraid Of? Horror and Paranormal. And they helped me take control of my own life. Now, it is my choice whether I wish to make phantom bangs in the night, appear at the foot of your bed in darkness, or make your walls bleed. If you are a disembodied person like I am, and you're living a lie, What Are You Afraid Of? Can help you too. They are on at 9 p.m. on Friday nights at Para-X Radio. leaving plenty of time for midnight haunting activities, and can be found on all major podcast services. Listen to their paranormal stories, interviews, humorous sketches and horror fiction to know that you are not alone. And if you are a member of the Embodied, don't forget, you are only a single heart attack or tumour away from becoming one of us. This is David Walton. See you on the other side. Or as I call it, this side.
And that is the end of a perfect day.
Your source for everything paranormal, Para-X.
Wonderful story.
That was great.
Yeah, and of course David is just a beautiful reader.
Yeah, I think he's like one of our best readers.
He is, and he is enthusiastic about reading. He performs a lot of our music. He's written a theme song to the upcoming comedy horror zombie sketches we're doing called Fluffy and Pete and the Zombie Apocalypse.
Nice.
Working on that, but we love David, and we really appreciate all the work he's done for the show. But we're back with the author of My Life Amidst the Paranormal, Cathy Gasch, on episode 74. Ghost DJ.
Ghost DJ.
The Ghost DJ.
That's right. One of the questions I had for you was, now, of all these spirits and these ghosts that you've spoken to, has any of them actually revealed to you, like what it's like to actually be on the other side, to you know what I mean?
Oh, good question.
Because I've never actually spoken to anyone that actually can answer that, and I was just wondering if any of them have ever explained it to you, or at least hinted at what it's like.
I have only asked a few that question, and to be honest with you, the only things that they have kind of let me know was, and it's a kind of a horrible thing to think of, but they said, you'll find out for yourself.
Yeah, well, we already know that.
I'm like, well, why do I have to wait? You know, why can't you tell me why you're able to come back, why you are in this particular kind of form, why I'm only able to see you in certain forms, or why am I only able to hear you and not see you? The only thing that they can let me know is it's just the type of existence that we have now. We're limited in what we can do.
Right.
And because there are a few that come to me and I can see them in my mind's eye and I can also hear them. And then there's others that I can only hear.
Okay, right.
And then there's been a few that I've only been able to see, and they've had to communicate with me through hand gestures for some reason.
Oh, okay.
Almost like a mime for me to figure out what they're trying to say.
Right.
So no one has actually answered that question. I don't know if they can't. I don't know if they won't.
Maybe there's something stopping them from answering that question.
I don't know.
Or maybe
That's
they
a possibility.
Maybe they have no idea themselves. I mean, we have no idea why we're here.
Right, we don't.
So maybe they have no idea what happened to them. I mean, a baby doesn't understand being born.
Right.
We don't really remember it. Maybe they just one day appeared and realized what was going on.
Yeah.
You know, maybe they're not telling you because they don't know.
Right.
Exactly. I think that's more it than not.
Yep.
And I mean, if you're already a ghost and you've got an attentive audience, you don't want to let that audience down.
Right.
No. I've had a few that I have someone that does know how to open a portal to send them to whether it's heaven or to be with their loved ones, wherever it is that they claim that they're sending them to. I've been next to this person when he's opened the portal, especially for Civil War soldiers. And sometimes these soldiers are very, very happy to go and be with their loved ones and be with their family and everything.
They're
then
happy.
There's a handful of them that are like, well, why do I need to go?
Yeah.
I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what is beyond that veil. I don't know what's beyond that portal.
Right.
I'm happy where I am right now.
Right.
So
yeah, so they're basically just reluctant to move on.
Yes. Yes.
And,
well, don't send too many home, because then we'd be out of business.
Yeah.
All of us.
Exactly.
Although I've heard that they can, even after those are moved on, can still return.
Can still come
Yes,
back.
they can. Yes.
Come back from the light, kind of thing.
Right.
Yes.
You know.
Yeah. So maybe not completely out of business.
Yeah, right. Well, so, yeah. But, well, Cathy, so talk to a lot of paranormal investigators and people who have been victim to what have been called either inhuman or demonic spirits. You know, everybody seems to have a different term for them, but these things were never living human beings on this earth, and they always seem to be malevolent. Have you ever encountered an inhuman spirit?
In all honesty,
Hopefully.
no, I have not. And that isn't to say that I may have, but didn't identify what it was. But to date, I have yet to come across anything that I have not been able to pin down as having been human
Right.
at some point. The only thing that I've ever encountered that I didn't consider to be of a human presence, I've encountered a couple of elementals, and I encountered a fae, or a she,
or fairy,
which is included in my book, which came to me in the form of a cat. Gee, go figure. But those were the only times that I've ever encountered anything that I could honestly say I didn't feel a human presence.
Yeah,
I've never felt anything malevolent, but when people have asked me if I've ever gone to a location where I was upset or I didn't like or felt uneasy or even scared, yes, I have. And more often than not, it's just because of the particular human presence that was there in spirit form that was just a nasty piece of work.
Right. Well, you know what? There are jerks in real life, and those jerks, when they die, will probably remain jerks.
If not more so.
Yes,
if not more
exactly.
So,
That does not change. Personality does not change just because you're gone.
Right.
Well, that's amazing. And you've been a wonderful guest on the show these last couple of episodes, and we really appreciate having you. I know we talked about having you on for some time now. We just had to wait for, because we plan these shows several months in advance. So we're always, planning content. So I put your name down, checked out your book, and put your name on the list for 2018. And you've just been wonderful. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
And
Really
again,
a pleasure having you. Yes.
her book is My Life Amidst the Paranormal, Cathy Gasch, and you can find that on Amazon.com. And we'll have links for that up at the website at www.
Also on Haunted Road Media.
On Haunted Road Media, yeah. We'll have links up for that too. The other
Yes.
great authors you have over there. And so, Bill, we've got some cool stuff coming up. I'm working out the final details to do an interview with Andy Fowler. And Andy he's done all the visual work on movies like The 300,
Right.
The Chronicles of Narnia, Prince Caspian, The Revenant, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. From what I read, he's an Emmy Award winning. He's connected to Through Line Films, which is making my first book into the movie,
Right.
The Street Martyr, and they just released a movie onto Netflix. It's called Aliens, Zone of Silence. And it was his first real movie
It was directorial debut, right?
directorial debut, yeah. And right now he's the special effects director at Netflix.
Nice.
And I'm working out the final times to do an interview with this wonderful, wonderful creative genius. Hopefully we'll have it in the next couple of shows. And also we're working on getting Sarah Hester, who was an actress who was in Aliens, Zone of Silence, which you can find on Netflix right now.
That's right. And I've actually seen some of the movie.
Yeah, I'm going to be watching it this
week.
week.
I jumped around just watch bits and pieces, but I am going to sit down and watch the whole thing from beginning to end. But from what I've seen, I like it. I think I was impressed with what I saw.
So we'll be, of course, on the show. We're sort of a horror magazine. We do paranormal, we do ghost stories, we do horror fiction, we do horror authors, we do indie creative people, comedy, that kind of thing.
That's right.
And we're going to end the show with part 2 of an interview with a great author. We played part 1 last time, by the name of Jasper Bark. He's published with Silver Lake Publishing, which we've done a lot of work with recently. Great rising indie horror publishing company. And we'll end the show tonight with part 2 of that interview. Well, it's been a cool show.
It's been a great show.
Yeah, and hopefully the snow won't be too bad this week.
No, I'm hoping not. I mean, dusting an inch, that's fine, but hopefully we won't get much more than that.
All right, hopefully the snow will stop for you soon, Kathy.
Yeah.
But
thank you.
Cross our fingers.
But of course, you can always snuggle up with a cat.
I already am.
7 of them, right?
Several cats, yeah. Your namesake, as it were, your totem spirit. And
Yes.
Well, it's been a great show.
It has.
Yeah.
And we look forward to seeing everybody on episode 75. Again, Cathy's book is My Life Amidst the Paranormal. You can find that on Amazon.com or links at www.whatareyoufraidofpodcast.com.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Cathy, again for being with us.
Thank you. Have a good night. Stay warm and stay dry.
Well, take care, Phil.
Yes, and thank you, Cathy, again. And Fox, take care.
And
we'll be back soon.
This is Jasper Bark on What Are You Afraid Of?
My name is Greg Bakken. I'm a writer, a producer, and a paranormal investigator. My favorite way of communicating with spirits is through using the spirit box, also known as a ghost box. I invite you to listen to me every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Central for interviews with people in the paranormal community and beyond. Plus, I will also include as much of my spirit box evidence as I can during my show. My name is Greg. Can you say Greg? Can you say Jeff? Greg. Jeff. Join me every Wednesday at 10 p.m. Central Time for Minnesota Ghost Box, only on Para-X Radio.
Mercy, a new horror medical thriller from author T. Fox Dunham, published by Bloodbound Books. Based on the author's horrific battle with a rare form of lymphoma that involved intense chemotherapy and radiation, Fox turns the horror of his experience into terror on the page.
William Saint is dying of cancer. On most days, death seems like a humane alternative to the treatment. Stricken with fever, William is rushed to Mercy, notorious as a place to send the sickest of the poor and uninsured to be forgotten, and finds the hospital in even worse condition than his previous visit.
Willie's memories faded. He grabbed his sack head of the scarecrow, picking at the exposed chicken wire to hold them in. However, the memories fell out of the holes in his face. They wormed and crawled from the leather flesh and the old clothing of the scarecrow, then squirmed and wiggled down his body.
The grounds are unkempt, the foundation is cracking, and like the wild mushrooms sprouting from the fissures of decay around it, something is growing inside the hospital. Something dark.
Fangoria gives Mercy 3.5 out of 4 skulls. Dunham has channeled his many brushes with the other side into the exquisitely rendered, lyrical, supernatural hospital thriller Mercy.
It's feeding on the sickness and sustaining itself on the staff, changing them, and now it wants Willie.
Come now, Mr. Saint. Just a little more of that sweet milk. So salty and so good. You won't miss it. And we ever do so like our delicacies here at Mercy Hospital.
Part medical horror, part supernatural suspense, Mercy is a hard-hitting fever dream of the novel. I enjoyed the hell out of it. Tim Wagner, author of The Way of All Flesh and Eat the Night. Available from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and bookstores everywhere in both print and digital versions.
Life is an addiction.
Let go. Let it all burn.
You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows, visit electronicmediacollective.com.
The lack of interest and just give up entirely.
Which is unfortunate, and it's a shame. Although sometimes, with the nicest will in the world, sometimes perhaps it's a bit of a godsend for them, because, as you say, this is a very, very long game, and it's not a game for the weak-hearted either. It takes a lot of dedication, a lot of devotion, and most real writers will be people who are obsessed with doing this anyway. That even if there was no recourse, even if nobody was going to read their work, they would still be spending 4 or 5 hours a day writing sentences, composing stories, thinking up plots, because they just had to do it. So the thing is, you reach a point whereby you realize your day job just is too soul destroying, and you're going to take the ridiculously ludicrous leap of faith and attempt to make some money, make an income out of writing. And since I've been doing that, I was a journalist before and a stand-up comedian before I actually went full-time writing in the late 90s, early noughties. Publishing has almost completely changed about 4 times. In fact, now it's in a constant state of flux. Just when you think you've got on top of how it all works, it all changes again and you have to relearn everything.
Social media is certainly causing a massive and almost chaotic evolution to the field of the arts, and I've been trying to chart those changes myself. In fact, that's why I created the show.
And social media it's a smaller and smaller platform. It's more and more and more of a rigged crapshoot, and it is rigged very much towards the house now. And if you are attempting to use social media for publicity, they are looking for ways at every single turn to make money out of you, rather than the reverse.
Quite so.
You have to keep on top of what their posting policies are on whatever particular platform you're using, and how to attract people to you, how to build an audience there, as well as how to build a reading audience, which, as you say, changes again on a daily basis. But as we keep on stressing, it is a very, very long game, and you need to be somewhat obsessive about what you're doing, and you need to take the obsession that you have, hopefully, if you really are a writer, for your art, and also apply that alongside your obsession to your art to an obsession to improving your career. And this doesn't mean necessarily, as we've said, fame and fortune and large Hollywood deals. It just means the ability to pay the bills every month by doing nothing else but writing stories.
How did you start writing?
I've written since the age of about 5, when I learned to read at the age of about 4. I learned to write at the age of about 4, and by about the age of 5, I was filling up textbooks I stole from school with comics and that I drew, although I have absolutely no talent whatsoever at art, so I very quickly just put aside any illusions about being a comics artist, but I still wanted to write comics, and I wrote stories. I've always written. I'm the UK equivalent of a high school dropout. I left school at 16 and bummed around for a while, and I happened to look into a job in the theatre. I won't tell you how I got that job, because I'm guessing this isn't an X-rated show. It was a time-honoured tradition that most actors find their way into the theatre. From that, I started writing scripts and plays, and from doing that, I became a stand-up. And then I thought, I probably need a less hand-to-mouth job than this, because by the time I got into my mid-20s, I'd actually managed to find myself in a relationship, and actually and had other kind of bills and responsibilities. So from that, I just BS'd my way into a job in journalism. I just wrote to lots of different publications and offered to write articles for them, and eventually they caved in, and I got enough of a CV to start going for other jobs, and ended up as a film and music journalist, which I just thought would be a fun thing to do, because I get paid to go out to gigs and get paid to watch films and talk to famous people.
As long as you can remember the horror film you watched on Halloween, of course.
Yeah, which completely escapes me. I did actually watch the original Carrie, but I watched that when my wife went to bed, and I can't remember the one that we watched. But got out of my head, I've watched an inordinate number of movies, because I spent 10 years as a film journalist. At the end of that, though, it began to occur to me I was spending a lot of time interviewing writers, mainly directors and mainly actors and other creative people, and having very, very creative conversations with these creative people, and realizing that I was on the wrong side of the microphone. That these people should be my peers, not people that I just interview. So I kind of, my wife at the time was pregnant with our second child. I'd sold a lot of comic scripts at that point to various comic publishers here in Europe, and I'd just got signed a contract for my first novel. And I told my wife that we were going to, I was going to quit my job. At the time, I was presenting stuff for cable TV. I was going to quit my job and become a full-time writer, and we were going to move to the country outside of the city of London. And it's to my wife's eternal eternal credit that she didn't stick a knife through my ribs at that point, that she took a deep breath and went, okay, seeing as we just had another mouth to feed on the way. And we moved out on basically my advance for that novel, paid for the move to here out in Bradford-on-Avon. And I just took a leap of faith and then started storming different publishers. As soon as you get one foot in the door, it becomes slightly easier to go and talk to other publishers, because you can say, look, I've had this book published by this particular publisher. And that's really how I started. And then after that, obviously, I started banging on various different agents' doors and various different publishers' doors.
So what advice would you give to an author right now trying to get to where you are?
Think about two things, really. Think about whether or not you want writing to be your primary career or your secondary career. And that depends upon how much risk you can deal with and how much insecurity you can deal with in your day-to-day life. If the idea of skating up on a regular basis to the very end of your overdraft and up to the very limit of every single one of your credit cards terrifies you, if the idea of having a bank account that once or twice a year is extremely full and the rest of the year is practically flatlining terrifies you, then probably you want to have a primary career doing something that you can put up with as a day job and have writing as a secondary career. It's something that will pay for a nice holiday. It will pay for, maybe if you save up your earnings for a couple of years, it will pay for a nice extension on the back of your house, but perhaps writing for a living isn't for you. If you think you are pretty much entirely unemployable and your ideal dream job is one in which you get to lounge around all day in a bathrobe, scratching your nuts and thinking up beautiful sentences until your wife or your partner comes home, then maybe you're a little better suited for being a full-time writer. But you have to deal with a lot of insecurity. So when you're thinking about writing full-time professionally, bear that in mind. It is a dream job that you do under nightmare conditions. That's the kind of karmic payback. If you were doing anything else for a living other than actually something you love being writing, nobody would work under these conditions ever. They are very, very difficult to put up with, as I'm sure you're aware yourself. So think to yourself, does this and an awful lot of very, very well-renowned, well-thought-of authors write as a secondary career? And even if they're making quite a good amount of money, people like David Moody or Christopher Fowler, who are two very, very big UK writers, they've always had a day job, and they've always had writing as a secondary career. Although David did go full-time for a little while, but got a bit bored with it and went back to getting a full-time job just recently.
Security a lot, and it's amazing how much I've seen that in the industry. It's you're so desperate for success that you either delude yourself into success when you're really not doing very well, or you end up forming cliques, and there's a lot of social animosity between authors, and a lot of these almost cliques that form that are members-only clubs, and there's been a lot of tension because of that with the various writing organizations and unions throughout the country. I don't know if you've noticed any of that.
Yes, it's unfortunate. When the water level drops and the pond becomes smaller and smaller and smaller, it tends to inflate egos somewhat, and everybody is fighting for a smaller amount of water, and people get egos flare up. There's a lot of animosity. And there's a tremendous amount of entitlement and egos rubbing up against each other, and people get very jealous of other people, what they perceive to be other people's success, and people tend to think other people don't deserve to be where they are. There is a famous joke in the theatre, which is, how many actors does it take to change a light bulb? 40. 1 to change the light bulb, and 39 to say, oh, I could have done that so much better, darling. And it tends to be often the same with any creative profession. There's other people thinking, well, how's that no talent person getting on, and why has he got 400 5-star reviews on Amazon, and how dare they? When nobody reads my work, or I write the sort of work that just isn't commercially successful, and it's just, the world is so unfair. All of which is tremendously unfortunate and unnecessary in many, many ways. You can wish other people well. And you should never, I guess the other thing you're mentioning about the insecurity, don't ever measure yourself against your peers. Measure yourself against the goals that you set yourself. So set yourself a series of goals and say, by next year, I want to get a publishing contract. I want to have had 4 stories published. I want to have got the attention of an agent. And then say the year after that, I want to have a novel placed with a mainstream publisher, or a novel placed with a good indie publisher, and I want to have made $2,000-3,000 off it. And the year after that, I want to double my income. Give yourself realizable goals and give yourself a good schedule, and measure yourself against the goals you've set yourself. Are you falling short of your own goals? Don't worry about other people's careers. They will wax and they will wane. And sometimes you think they aren't, their talent no way deserves the type of praise and attention they're getting. And other times you will have friends whose work you hugely admire, and you will think it a huge injustice that they aren't better known as a writer themselves. The world isn't always a fair place, but don't let those things affect your mood or your ability to do your job.
Right. Well, something that I always tell people, and that's don't seek the validation of authors whom you think are better than you. Seek the validation of your readers. Too many times, authors go out and fight for other authors to read their books, and it's like you're directing your energy in the wrong market here. You need to be thinking about how many readers you have that you've never met that, will give you no accreditation as a celebrity. So.
Yeah, that's a very, very key and important thing. Your publisher will contact other authors and say, will you read this book and give us a quote? But as a professional author yourself, you are somewhat under siege from a lot of other authors who aren't as far on in their career as you are. And you will constantly get besieged with people who want you to read their unpublished manuscript. And it's very, very, very key and extremely important to point out to any authors listening to this that you are sending your manuscript to completely the wrong person. If you want really good professional feedback, then you have to pay for a professional editor to read your work to give you that kind of feedback, or you have to pay an agent's reader to give you that kind of feedback. If you want somebody to hand your book over to other publishers, then you have to get an agent to read your work, and you have to enter into a professional contract with that agent. An author will not get you published, and an author really has an incredibly difficult, very time-consuming job, and doesn't always have the time to read and criticize other authors' work for no fee whatsoever at all. That's tremendously unfair, and you're asking the wrong professional to give you feedback. Go and pay somebody who does give you professional feedback, who knows what they're talking about. And that's not always another author. And most people write to an author for those main 2 purposes. Will you show my book to your editors? And editors don't take recommendations off other authors. They take recommendations off agents. That's the whole deal. And authors aren't always the best people to criticize other people's work. That's a whole skill set that's not necessarily their own. They're too busy reading their own work. So don't send your manuscript to a professional author and say, will you read this and will you help me? Because if you were setting up a pizza shop and you were going to sell pies to people, you wouldn't go down the road to your local Pizza Hut or down your road to your local independent successful store and say, will you read my business plan? Will you tell me how to make pizza? Will you send half of your customers over to my shop? You get thrown out in your ear. And the authors that you're approaching, saying to them, will you spend a huge amount of time reading my work, getting into professional shape, or will you show it to your editors, are people who are your direct competition commercially. And they will be nice to you, they will be encouraging to you, they will be helpful towards you and probably give you little tips, but they're not the person to send your unread manuscript to ever. And it's an occupational hazard that all authors have, and we try and find the nicest possible way to wriggle out of it and to point these things out to people. And I will send them addresses of agents, and who will look at unpublished authors, and I will send them editors who will read manuscripts and help you get into shape. But I'm not the person that you ought to be speaking to, and I'm not the person that ought to be reading your unpublished manuscript. I'm tremendously sorry.
It's very true, and I'm inundated by people who always want me to read their work, and I just can't. And sometimes they take it very personally, but
it's not personal. It's just not your job.
Right.
You wouldn't go to your accountant and say, "Will you read my manuscript?" You wouldn't go to the lady over the counter who sells you coffee first thing in the morning. "Hey, would you read my unwritten book?" You'd never say that. So, and also, you shouldn't really give it to an author because they're the wrong person.
Okay, I may have done that to the lady who served me coffee over the counter one time, and
but she was kind of cute, yeah.
Do you know what happened? She married me.
Well, that was the result, my friend.
Yes, that was a good thing.
But she
for me.
wasn't another author.
No, exactly. And I find that pure readers, not authors, make better editors.
Mm-hmm.
I just find they just have better practical advice for me about what they're seeing. Well, we have had an extraordinary conversation with an experience. I mean, he was down in the trenches most of his life, somehow in the coal mine, deriving a living, which I'm sure there were some very touch-and-go times, from the arts, from journalism, from writing fiction. And if anyone complains or gives up too soon, they just have to hear the story of Jasper Bark and know that the key is to keep going, always. And thank you so much for being on the show. Would you like to tell us a little bit about your work, your newest releases from Crystal Lake, and where you can get them from?
I have a new novella out from Crystal Lake. It's called Quiet Places. It is a piece of cosmic folk horror. It's an intensely atmospheric piece that contains stories within stories, contains an awful lot of folklore, and it's linked to an ancient heresy which stretches back to the very beginning of time itself and may well give you most of the answers to the secrets of the universe. That's called Quiet Places. You can buy it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble. You can order it from your local bookshop. That's very, very well worth the read. Currently racking up an awful lot of 5-star reviews, and the reviewers on the different blog sites and other publications have been very, very kind, and long may they continue to be. I also have a graphic novel that's just come out called Parasassin. That's published by Marcosia, and it's collected from the pages of Aces Weekly. And Aces Weekly is one of the leading award-winning completely electronic comics out there on the web. That's published by David Lloyd, who is one half of the creative partnership behind V for Vendetta. He designed the anarchist mask that's worn by protesters worldwide. Parasassin was originally serialized in Aces Weekly and has now been collected with extra material. It's a time travel political parody that sits on the very bleeding edge of sci-fi and horror, and is practically unmissable. Again, it's been very critically acclaimed, very, very well received. That's also available from Amazon and on order from your local comic shop if you want. And finally, I've just launched a new webcomic called Fearfix, and it's a bit of an homage to those wonderful old black and white comics from the 60s, 70s and 80s, like Warren's Creepy and Eerie and Skyward's Psycho and Scream, and also to a equal degree to the wonderful EC horror comics like Vault of Horror and Tales from the Crypt. And like all of those comics, it also has a very creepy, extremely dodgy, very, very worrying narrator. But in this instance, that narrator is me. I've actually turned myself into a comic strip character, and in a Rod Serling style fashion, I'll be introducing all these stories. And I've got some amazing talents, some leading up-and-coming artists from the world of both mainstream and indie comics. And that can be found at my website, www.jasperbark.com, and just click on the Fearfix button on my website. And the first edition is out now. It's called A Bad Girl's Guide to Making a Killing. So that's my elevator pitch.
And we will have all that information up on our show website at www.whatareyouafraidofpodcast.com, where you can find links to Jasper's site, his work, and more information about the author. And hopefully a few photos we'll have them up there. Well, Jasper, it's been lovely talking to you. Thank you so much.
thank you so much, Fox, for having me on. It's been a huge pleasure chatting to you.
T. Fox Dunham lives in Philadelphia with his wife Allison. He's a lymphoma survivor, cancer patient, modern bard and historian. His first book, The Street Martyr, was published by Gutter Book, a major motion picture based on the book is being produced by Throughline Films. Destroying the Tangible Illusion of Reality or Searching for Andy Kaufman, a book about what it's like to be dying of cancer, was recently released from Perpetual Motion Machine Publishing, and Fox is a story in the Stargate anthology, Points of Origin, from MGM and Fandemonium Books. Mercy was recently released by Bloodbound Books. Fox is an active member of the Harvard Association. He's been published in hundreds of short stories and articles, and his motto is Wrecking Civilization, one story at a time.
Phil Thomas resides in the suburbs of Philadelphia and is an author and filmmaker. His screenplays have been produced into feature films such as False Face and Always from Darkness that are available in major retailers such as Best Buy and Target, as well as availability on Netflix and Amazon On Demand.
The views expressed and the opinions given by the individual host and their guests do not necessarily reflect those of Para X, its affiliates, or its sponsors.